Welcome to the office hours for August. We'll be starting in just a little bit. Glad to see you all jumping on right away. Always good to see the variety of people we get attending these. Should be a fun topic today of data visualizations. It's always the part everyone loves to work around with. You know, when they actually get some data in and get a pretty picture, it's kind of satisfying. Starting in just a couple minutes. Hope everyone's had a wonderful week. I know down here in South Georgia, we've had some unseasonably cool weather, which has been a nice thing because generally it's hot, it's muggy, it's kind of unpleasant in the middle of August, but no, it was mid 80s, rather pleasant. I'll let you all know that while we're doing the webinar, at any point you can put questions in the question box, the Q&A section on the webinar. We'll get through those. I highly recommend the Q&A section because that way I actually make sure I answer your question. The chat sometimes gets a little full and we don't always get to jumping on those topics. So pretty good crowd for a Friday here in mid-August. Not so much for the ag folks because I think some of them are out dealing with harvest and dealing with other things going on, but glad to see the folks we do have. Getting started in just a minute here. And now by my clock, it's 11 o'clock and we appreciate your time. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm Joe LaForest. I'm your presenter for this week on our office hours for data visualizations. A lot of time gets spent into collecting data. And after you've got it, you really want to be able to do something with it that's going to help. For why you were collecting that data in the first place. So this is going to be more about using the tools that EDDMapS is providing to do that than it is about general visualizations or pulling the data out and using it in ArcGIS, pulling it out and using it in Tableau or RStudio, or there's a lot of really, pardon me, fancy programs out there for doing visualizations. And many of them wonderful to use. However, what we've set up and what we work with folks a lot is how our own libraries we provide for visualization can help folks out. While they may not be the best and fanciest tools out there, they tend to be free, which isn't inconsiderable or free to you. And they tend to be stuff that is straight and to the point. How to get people to action, how to get people to what they want to do. Action is the goal. That's the part I always bring people back to when they say, all right, I have data. Well, what do we want to do with this visualization? I can make a lot of pretty pictures that have absolutely no relevance to the outside world, but darn, isn't that picture pretty? Isn't that map lovely to look at with all the bright colors? That's not so much what I'm interested in. I want to know that given the data you spent time collecting, what is the message you're trying to give to a grower, to a land manager, to someone trying to do something with this? There was only so much time we had for collecting data. You gave someone a form that was 50 questions long, 2 people answered that because no one's going to spend the time to go down that. So you pared down what data you're going to collect. You've got a handful of fields that are really important. And we'd like to think that when you were looking at those fields, you went, I want to know this, because if the threshold in this trap reaches 100 moths caught in the week, they need to go out and take action. They need to go do something in their field. Or here, I want to know where it's expanding. So I need to know this data, and this is how we're going to work with it. So there's a lot of soul searching that goes on in this first step. Before you even touch a line of code, before you do anything, what are you going to show someone based on the data you collect that gives them the right information to make the right decisions about what they should be doing? From that, now we can start doing stuff. We can start building something that's worth looking at. So we're going to start with simple data summary visualizations. We do this a lot. Based on the data, I want to color a county or a point based on a summary of the data collected. Those summaries can be the min, the max, the last value recorded, the first value recorded, the difference between values. It's the stuff that if you have the data, you could sit there in Excel and do these calculations, figure out what the value would be, and generate a map, generate a graph. We do that exceedingly well. If you know that pattern ahead of time, it's not hard to tell the map what to do. So first example, I'll go in here. This is a county level map. We were collecting data on kudzu bug. People were sending it in from all over the region. They want to know, how is kudzu bug spreading? How fast is it moving? So we take the minimum date observed for all the verified data. We look at that on a county level, pretty straightforward. And then we apply a color scale to it, which gets to be complicated when you get out the 14, 15 color classes and trying to tell the difference between all of them. This visualization gives a nice general idea of how long it's taken for them that spread to happen. If someone spends too long looking at it, their eyes get a little crossed because they're going, well, can I really tell the difference between the color of this county and that county? It's close, but you're getting the general idea from this of, all right, it started with early infestations here. You can see where that brown's extended to, and you're not seeing a whole lot on the dark end in these counties. So the spread is really slowed down or the reporting slowed down. Interesting question about which that is. And we're not seeing the expansion nearly as quickly. It still tells people that hasn't been seen. And if I'm in one of those counties that's white, maybe I should consider reporting, because they apparently don't have a report of kudzu bug in my area. So this is aimed at that audience, just general awareness. It's coming your way. Here's where we know it to be. Please help this effort by reporting more. We've taken this same data and the group started asking a different question, because this is nice, but it kind of gives the impression that this brown area, that must just be thick with kudzu bugs. You're swatting them off all day long and they're getting into your soybean. Well, that's not what was being seen in the field. They started asking the question of, we had Beauveria bassiana, a nice fungus, come in and knock out much of the population. You had 2 parasitoids come in after this kudzu bug that also knocked the populations down. And so now we have people asking the question, all right, it came in, it established, how are those populations doing? This is looking at the exact same data. This is how many years has it been since somebody reported it? If they haven't reported it, either it's not really been an issue or it's not currently in populations that it's interfering with people, or that's the assumptions we're going off of. So, pardon me, pretty simple questions. And given the same data set, we can color in the counties however we need to, based on the data we're provided. So these all start with that. What message do you want to look at here? What do you want to try to tease out of this data? After we've made the map for one species, it's extremely easy to set up and distribute these maps for other ones. However, if the data behind it is not robust enough and not collected with the same regularity, you can't really make some of the same conclusions. It does lead to some things where, yes, we have maps that people occasionally look at, but how much do you want to believe the story of what that data is telling you? If I were to apply this to kudzu as opposed to kudzu bug, kudzu doesn't have near the regularity of data, has a much wider date range. And looking at this, you'd have a hard time with a straight face saying that's a map you would believe. This is another example of a map that we've been working on and put out for a number of years. And this one, we're actually taking multiple slices. So you're looking at this one playing through time as southern corn rust, the population of that dies back every year and blows up through the United States. So what growers are wanting to know is when are we seeing those first infestations of southern corn rust? Because if it's not showing up in my area, it's died back, I can wait a little longer before I start some of those fungicide treatments. I can perhaps change the timing of when I'm going to plant. I can adjust how I'm managing my crop based on when I can see southern corn rust blowing up from the southern US. So again, someone had to think through this process and go, all right, here's what we're going to do. And this drives the corn disease working group every year to collect the data, making this possible, to provide this nice show of here's the disease moving up every year. This is an example we've been working with recently with Arkansas. They started doing trap catches. And we're actually going to go to this page and take a look. So for them, what they're really interested in is, and every once in a while I have an issue with something loading as nicely as I like. So with this, they have traps all over the county, and they have a threshold for southwest corn borer, or they have a threshold for corn earworm. What they want to be able to show someone is when I go to one of these sites, well, what's been the trap catches at those sites? because based on this, they're going out in the field and they're doing their scouting. They may be changing what their treatments are in the field, trying to control corn or earworm or Southwest corn borer out there. They also asked for, all right, we have this going, this is nice. This map updates in real time, showing me what's above threshold and what's not. I'd also like to dump out the data. So let's go ahead and just give everybody the table they always like to see for here's the month, or sorry, here's the day that this data was collected or that week. And then here's all the trap catches. So if I really want to see what the numbers were at a glance across a county, I can do that. All this comes from the extension specialist, Glenn Studebaker, saying, we were already doing this. We were collecting this data in Excel, but now when we put the information online into EDDMapS, this updates automatically. I'm not having to go print out a bunch of those Excel sheets into PDFs. Here it is. I don't have to generate the maps. We already know the rules for what's supposed to show up. And so we work with folks that they have a very clear idea. This is exactly how I want this to go. And so it makes it very easy to build these visualizations. When we're doing it, we're making this fairly generic. They've embedded this map onto the page. They've got in here what projects the data is coming from, the subject, they're putting the threshold in. There are URL variables we're passing into these maps that make it possible to customize it. So you're not stuck with just, this is the University of Arkansas map, and this is all it's ever going to do. We've got variables to let you adjust and modify these as you have different things that you want to do with it. This is where we start working with folks and saying, all right, what's your use case? All right, that sounds a lot like what so-and-so wants to do. And so how do we move forward with that? And like I was mentioning, customizing this is easy. There's a lot of different ways, and these are different views of the same data set, whether someone wanted to see it by year, whether they wanted to see it by county, where they, what they wanted to see in here. If you're going to maps.eddmaps.org, which is the URL we've got right here, this is where we've put a lot of the instructions on using our maps. And we've tried to provide some basic instructions of the types of variables you're going to see in these URLs and how to work with them. So I'm going to work off an example of, I see this occurrence map. It's just presence, absence of what's been found in the field. And so let me start with this particular one here. I'm going to continue with that whole Arkansas theme. I'm looking at corn earworm, Helicoverpesea. And here's just, I dropped in the species code for it. We have a lookup on our, getting a little lost here. Give me 1 second. So from the page with all the instructions, one of the lookups we have is our subjects. Any subject that people are reporting data for, you can generate one of the maps that's been set up for it. So I come here and I look up would probably help if I spelled it right. It really helps if I spell it right. Corn earworm, Helicoverpesea. So if I could spell that the first time, it would have been much better off. Here's the subject ID I'm looking for. I come in and on my URL, I've put that up there. So this map now is showing me Helicoverpesea. If I want to see this exact same map for kudzu, I've memorized the code for kudzu. It's 2425. I can just switch between subjects by all I'm doing is changing that code, and it's pulling different data from the database for what's been released. This is a lovely map and they're showing some nice things, but it's only showing me positive data. So back to the instructions we have for this particular map, it says, okay, there's optional parameters I can add in here. I have the option to say negative. I want to see also the negative data that's out there. So I add in at the end of this, and negative equals 1. Okay, so now I have negative data that's also showing up on these maps. That's what all the gray points are that I'm seeing here. I can then start working with this and saying, all right, let me see what other parameters I had as options here. Color. That green is a lovely color, but honestly, if I'm at Arkansas, I'd rather much that be a good color to represent the Razorbacks. So it's looking for a hex code. You provided a color code up here in the URL. Now it says, all right, that green, we're not going to use that green because this is going to go on my website. I want this embedded just like I would a YouTube video. Here you go. Now I've got these red colors that are in here. I want to go a step further and I want to say, I really want this to focus in on Arkansas and Tennessee and Kentucky because, the US is a wonderful thing to look at, but honestly, I just want it to really focus in on the area that I care about. All right, now that I've done that, I'm looking at saying, I'd like to go a little further and I don't want all those other states around it showing up. And so we have another parameter of removing the states that aren't in that list. So all these little customizations, all these little tweakings of the map, all the county maps support this. It's working with folks and saying, I don't need to go build a special configuration just for your use case. We've already built the map. Here are the optional parameters you can adjust and tweak to make this happen. We're working to get this better documented. You can see the limit states or the remove states option I just used isn't in here. It's one of the banes of being a programmer. You write functionality, then you have to rewrite the documentation about what you just wrote. And sometimes keeping that up to date doesn't happen as often as we like. But we work through trying with our partners, figuring out what's going to work for them and start providing these examples of different ways that you can use the data. It's where we spend a lot of time and where I think we get most of the satisfaction out of our work is seeing data come in from the field and being put to direct application. So that's the basic visualizations that we do a ton of. People are using them all the time. They're embedding those into their websites, just like you do a YouTube video or anything else, and they're there for people to use. And they'll update as new data is coming in. You have a new visualization anytime you have your partners working with you to bring that data in. We've also done some reaching out with partners that said, all right, we're going to pull down a bunch of data. We're going to do some analysis. And some of these analyses are going to get a little complicated. We're going to look at habitat. We're going to look at weather. We're going to look at climate. We're going to look at a number of other factors that EDDMapS doesn't necessarily have access to. And after we come up with something cool, we want to return and show that online. So we work with folks, say, all right, here, you've gotten it to this point. Let us help you and operationalize that. Let's make it web ready and put it online for you. So here's one example. Someone took brown marm rated stink bug data and said, all right, here we go with it. We're going to do a habitat suitability map. Blue, not so suitable. But those hotter colors, that's where, yeah, you'd expect to be seeing brown marm rated stink bug. Let's then join that with this layer of dots where you have data in EDDMapS and you have these different points that are out there. And we're going to encourage people to report brown marm rated stink bug to help get us a better understanding of where it is and better improve the habitat suitability models. Okay, well, so you need to see then those red dots are new records where we've called for people to send data and they are actively supporting this campaign. And the gray dots where, yes, we see this data out there, but it's been in the database. It was some of the data that already helped to generate this model. So after David Crowder and Javier out in Washington State set up this model, they sent it over. We put it into a web-ready format so that someone could actually browse this online, zoom into their area, and it would load quickly and easily. We did the same thing with Bethany Bradley and Jenica Allen. They were running climate change models on different weed species, about 800 of them. They said, all right, we have this data compiled on whether or not the different climate models agree on the range of Canada thistle. So could you put those into new county maps for us? So we loaded that into our database and then did a simple tally of how many models agree that this species would be in that county or be widely spread in that county. And so again, just making it a web-ready thing. What they had at the time was an R Shiny app, which deployment can go well. It cannot, depends on what infrastructure you have. We just put it into our mapping engine and it's happy to serve those out. Same for, this is another look at their data where they're looking at how many models say it's going to be there. And depending how many models you select, it either says, well, based on the data in EDDMapS plus this expansion, EDDMapS doesn't have data, but the model says it should be there. Retraction, EDDMapS has data, but the models don't agree. And you might see a species not being there nearly as much. And how many models do you want to agree with that? The first one here being one model said it would be there. This one being all 13 models agree it's going to be there. Again, different visualizations based on the same data and mixing it with the occurrence data we already have. So this is where we have fun with folks that have done additional computation, sent us back a value added data set, and now how we would put that into something that can be shown online. We've done similar things with pecan nut case bearer. This is where there is a trapping network out there. They are putting out a pheromone trap when they get two consecutive trap catches of an adult. So 2 days in a row, they caught adults. That tells them, all right, we finally have the biofix point that I can project forward with degree days on when I should be seeing eggs. And so we provide this simple map showing that projection forward and when your decision window for management is imminent, active, or past. And they've got a similar tool that even if you weren't trapping for it, I could drop a point on the map, select my biofix date, and it does the calculation based off the weather data that's being provided to us from this group here. So occasionally reaching out to other groups, trying to operationalize a model they had and were working with. These tend to incur some need for funding, because figuring out what data sources are available for the weather, accessing it, pulling it back, and then making so everything we validated the result coming back takes time. And it's a little more involved than just doing a query of the database, returning current records, summarizing and showing it somewhere. We do have some interesting examples that this is just a summary map. Simple summary statistics showing, has cucurbit downy mildew been observed? So this one falls in that first category of maps. But based on this, they then have someone that comes in and they're actually drawing areas of the country saying, these are your high risk and low risk areas for cucurbit downy mildew based on weather in those areas, atmospheric transport of spores, and they're writing up these commentaries. So we support them in what they're doing, providing them the tool to write those commentaries, draw these up, and then provide a multi-day forecast for what something is. It's not as clean as some of the things you could do with a model, but this has been through a human's brain. They've drawn the areas on the map. They've removed some of the little areas. The model kind of colored in this area, but it was an artifact of the model. They've got the expertise to look at that and have a better assessment of what's going on. So there's a lot of things here, and I'll go ahead and answer the one question that Megan brought up. Are these visualizations available for Canada? Yes, they are. Matter of fact, it's as simple as much as I do love the corn earworm map for only that, countries equals US, CA. So there's Canada. We've had fun with Canada. I love Canada. Canada is a great place. I love to visit. Alberta, you kind of drive me nuts sometimes because we had fun figuring out what your counties were. But once we figured that out, yes, these are available and works out for whatever they want there. We also do have Mexico as well. It's, you know, the folks that have said, hey, here's where we'd like this to cover. The point maps, those go anywhere that point people have released that point data. Not everyone wants to release that point data. So that always gets to be an interesting concern. So how do you get what you want? A lot of you aren't tech people, I gather. Some of you watching me write in those URLs are probably going, oh my God, he's writing code. What is he doing? Why is he torturing us? That's the lowest level of tech we have there. For you're providing some different variables in that URL. At some point, we'd love to get a graphical user interface for you to come in and select options from dropdowns. We haven't had funding to support that development, so we're hopeful one day we'll get that. So for now, we have instructions. We help try to match what people want and how to get that done. The steps I always, and I'm going back kind of in summary here. First of all, you have to start with what story are you trying to tell? What do you want to do with this data? It can be a multi-part story. It can be, all right, my first step on this is I want counties lit up by the last time there was data and how many things were caught in the trap. And then when I click on it, I want a graph that shows this. And when I mouse over this, it's going to show this information. You can have multi-step journeys here. You can tell the story how you want. But if you don't have a good idea of what you wanted to show getting out of the data, it makes it extremely difficult for us to be able to give you something that's updating in real time. It is where I do both love and sometimes thankfully tolerate working with researchers. They have great ideas and wonderful things. They wish they want to have a visualization that does this. And then you show it to them. And then the answer is, no, I want a visualization that does this. But you said you wanted this. I know, I changed my mind. And we've sometimes gone around in circles, chasing where people want to go. They are good journeys. I don't mind them. It's just when the target's always moving, the goalposts move for where you want it. It can be a little challenging. Once you do have a clear story of where you want that to go, we do have examples. maps.eddmaps.org, go there. We're going to work on updating that documentation and get a more comprehensive set of maps listed up there. We're also working on doing a better job, and this is an early preview for you. This is where we were working with folks of here are selected maps from different projects where it's a use case somebody gave us, and we walk through how we get to that point. So you're going to be seeing these in a little while. We'll start to advertise these as we put them out and say, look, here's a new map of where someone wanted to do this. Is that close to what you wanted to do? There are the embedded maps and graphs that update in real time. There are also a whole section of static maps that doing an iframe and embedding a map on a page, some people are okay with it, some people have issues. Just about everybody can put an image on a page. So we do have other cases where here's a static image of the current occurrence of Japanese knotweed or whatever the particular species you're interested in is. We update that map in the background on our CDN, on our storage for where those files go, and the map still updates. Wherever that map's embedded, you always have the current picture, and we put a date in the corner for when that map was last generated. So there are ways to work around different constraints you have in different content management systems and how we pull all that together. And if all else fails, reach out to us. You've got our general email address, bugwood@uga.edu. If you don't know who to talk to, that's a good place to go. If you are working in agriculture or some of those areas, I tend to get more of those calls. Chuck tends to get the ones where it's natural areas and forestry. Rebecca really has a great time doing dashboards and other things for citizen science projects to help encourage campaigns moving forward. So great times for working with partners and sometimes just giving them that step they need to find what they're looking for. So that's what I've got for this particular presentation on data visualizations. We have plenty of time for questions. I've probably given you enough to make you interested in some things, but the actual implementation of doing it, you'd probably still have questions. That's kind of typical for these, because until you've actually sat down and played with a couple yourself, it really doesn't necessarily sink in and become something that's part of your skill set. But that's why we're here. We're happy to help. We'll take in questions and answers. If you have questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A. We'll be getting through all those. I do see there's one here. Can you combine all the invasive knotweed that we see? So a follow-up to you, Matt, is all the invasive knotweed. Are you talking about multiple species of knotweed? Or are you talking about when you say all the invasive knotweed? All right, so yes, he is. So yes, it is possible on these to on different maps, and I'll show you an example here looking more at just because I have to go look at the code to make
Joe,
sure.
Before you can you put that URL in the chat for Megan? She wanted to basically have how you get to that Canadian map again.
Yeah.
So just drop that in there for her, and I think she can go from there.
Yeah. Countries equals US, CA. If you want Mexico, MX.
And if you just want just Canada, you can just say country equals Canada, CA.
Yes, I've been in the US too long. Why wouldn't anyone want to see the US? I mean, we're fantastic. No, you can have just Canada too. Although it always looks weird without Alaska sitting there. It's a thing. Back to Matt's question. Is it possible to put multiple species together? Yes, it is. Give me 1 second to verify that I've got the right map for that. And this is where we have more fun than should likely be healthy. So I've got to go look and make sure I've got the right code for it. But there are certain maps that we allow multiple subjects to be entered into the URL. So I just start adding additional subjects by doing subjects equals, and I put the whole list of numbers in there. I need to go look to see if our presence map supports multiple right now. If it doesn't, that's an easy add. I do know we have species comparison maps that we can do multiple species combinations, or we could bring up, you mentioned Japanese giant and Bohemian. You mentioned a fourth. Right now, I can only compare 3 because we're using a color additive model. Red, blue, and green, or sorry, red, blue, and yellow. When you combine those 2 together, when you combine the different colors, you get their combinations, and I can only go up to 3 for combinations, which ends in brown. Not the best color in the world, but okay. So yes, there are different maps that do support multiple ones in. I'll look to go find you one that would combine it all together in one species distribution map. I think the presence map will support it, but it's been a day since I looked at it. And then the other part of that you wanted that to do it just for Wisconsin. And states equals Wisconsin. And if you only really want to see Wisconsin, then we're adding a parameter to just show Wisconsin. So not a problem to make those customizations and get what you're looking for. And I'm going to go ahead and clear those by answering those live. Another question. Daniel asks, how about monitoring status with some logic, e.g. not monitored in the last year, monitored versus monitored in the last year, monitored in the last year with no invasives found versus monitored in the last year with invasives present. So depending how you define those monitoring statuses, yes, it's possible. The question is, how are you defining those statuses? Whether something is monitored, just because I have data for it. I have plenty of data that, going back to the corn disease data, that folks have said, yes, from what I hear, expert opinion, personal communication, we have tar spot of corn active in this county. I also have actual observations from the field where someone has rated the incidence and severity of a field plot. So when you say it's being monitored, does that mean that someone is actively going out and checking an infestation, and so you're looking for presence of that data? Or does it mean that someone submitted at least a personal communication that they still think it's active and out there? So based on the data being collected, the data in the database, if you can come up with how we would come up with those categories, yes, very possible to make the map do it. It's just, how are you defining that particular status? Someone mentioned I managed to get the map of Mexico to show. Doesn't seem to be any data for the particular species you're looking at, buffalo grass. This is true. EDDMapS is based on where data has been provided for different species. The map I am frequently get called out on, which I always find fun, And you can tell I've been working too long at this job because I know a lot of codes by hand. This is brown marmorated stink bug. No one that looks at this map goes, oh yeah, there's no way it's in that county. White just means I don't have data. We are constantly working with partners to encourage them to aggregate data in, share data between partners, and help get things to work out. So it's just a matter of, do we have the data available and how do we make all that play nice together? So yeah, good times working with data. Where we do have someone that says, I think there's data there, what do I do? Why aren't I seeing it? That's where someone opens a bug report. We get down to the brass tacks of looking to find out why something's not showing up on the maps. And it's always interesting to see sometimes what happens with the data that's come in. Sometimes it didn't get quite assigned to the right county. Sometimes it moves. Sometimes county designations, oddly enough, change. We had that with a county in South Dakota actually change its FIPS code in the past 7 years, which I wouldn't think that would happen that often, but apparently it does. Question from John. Where do we get instructions to play with these functions? The website says try it, but there needs more instructions. I agree. The instructions we have to be able to come down here and try it, that whole try it section opens up a JS fiddle that you can, for those who aren't geeky, I'm sorry, I go geeky sometimes. JS Fiddle is a playground that developers use to come in and be able to play around with what their code is doing. Modify things up and then go, all right, well, you just put that in there, now let me run it. And it'll keep updating based on what you've done there in the corner. The different parameters are here. As I said, this is one of those things that we do need to make a better job of, more instructions and documentation for how you do it. It might even be good to have a video on how do I use JS Fiddle, or how do I play around with this? For those that aren't familiar with URL parameters, it can be a bit of a hurdle, but that's always an interesting question. It's something I still struggle with today. After you've learned how to do something, how do you explain something to someone that hasn't done it? I remember my first trips into development, I could kind of understand what somebody was talking about. And it wasn't until having done it myself and worked through some growing pains that, thankfully at the time, I had friends who were willing to sit down with me and go, all right, Joe, let me talk to you a little bit about URLs. Let me talk to you about query strings and how the web works, that I had enough understanding to do this better. We need to provide probably a little tutorial to help people through that first step. It's not difficult once you understand the jargon and where this is coming in. And perhaps even more examples here may make it easier for folks to jump on and use some of these examples. Other questions, comments? Yeah, short YouTube video tutorial, someone mentioned. Yep, that would definitely be something that we can put together. So much of what we do is based on if you know just a little, and we're not talking knowing how to do hardcore programming. We're just talking about adding parameters or something. It's where I'd love to actually have the tool for you online, that here's the different map types. And when you select the map type, all right, here's your possible parameters you can select. And it's sitting there composing a URL for you. Love to get to that point. Only so much time in my day. The webinar is recorded. Someone just asked that question. So this will be available on the tools and training section of EDDMapS. That's also a good segue that tools and training. I should put that into the proper window for you. There we go. So our virtual office hours are here. Here's the previous ones that have been done. The next one coming up is no longer just to be determined. It's going to be using EDDMapS and EDDMapS Pro apps versus the old regional apps. For those that are not familiar with the history, it has been there has been a long history of building apps and setting things up with EDDMapS. That at one time, a lot of folks said, you know, I need to have a regional app. It needs to be the Southeast Early Detection Network app. And well, I need to have the Mid-Atlantic Early Detection Network app. After a while, folks went, it's hard enough getting people to work together. And between the Southeast and the Mid-Atlantic, Virginia never knows where to show up. So can we just call it EDDMapS? And some of that other functionality. So Chuck next time is going to be going through a lot of that, talking about how it's evolved and what things are currently available and some of the advantages of both those apps. But yes, our recordings under the training section, the next one will be up here. If you want to catch any of our old sessions, they are still up there as well for how to be a verifier, getting started in EDDMapS Pro, and all the fun and joy that comes with projects, branding, and setting yourself up for maintaining your own workspace in EDDMapS. Other questions, comments? We're getting towards the end of the hour, but we do still have a little bit of time. Hearing none, it's been great having you all join these office hours. If there's a topic you wish we would talk about, let us know. Drop it in the Q&A. Send us something via email. Let us know what you're interested in. We sit around and go, I think this would be a great topic, but we aren't you. What we think are the best topics in the world to talk about might not be what you want to hear about. So always happy to pick up a topic that you particularly have interest in and explore that road. Great having you all on the call, and we'll see you next time when we do office hours next month, which it'll be September 16th. Same time.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We hope to see you at our next one.
Yep. Stay safe, stay healthy.